Hello and welcome to Mordiego's very epic Blood DPS guide. In this video, I'll be going over everything you need to know to play Blood DPS to the best of its ability. From race and talents to rotation and bistless, I will be covering it all so you can prove to everyone that Blood can indeed pump. So without further ado, let's get right into it, starting with the races. For the races, it's the same for most if not all DPS specs. Your best race will be Troll then Orc for Horde, and Draenei then Human for Alliance. Your stat priority is pretty comparable to a Frost Death Knight, prioritizing hit to 8 or 9% for the spell hit, strength, crit, armor pin, expertise to 6.5%, and then haste. With the release of epic gems and armor pin items with Trial of the Grand Crusader raid, after hit, armor pin becomes your second best stat up to the soft cap of 509, assuming you have Mjolnir Runestone and the talent Bloodgorged, and then in Icecrown Citadel to the hard cap of 1260 with the talent Bloodgorged as well. Onto the talents, starting with the Blood Tree, we want to take Butchery and Subversion for a 9% Heartstrike crit chance. Then we can move down to Bladed Armor, turning all of our plate gear into attack power, and then 200 weapon spec, which is just 4% damage. Dark Conviction will be 5% crit chance for everything we do, and then a very big talent here in Death Rune Mastery. This will make every Death Strike we cast turn the Frost and Unholy Rune we just used into Death Runes that we can use to cast Heartstrike later. We can go down to Bloody Strikes here. This will give us 45% Heartstrike damage and 30% Blood Boil damage, helping us a little bit of AoE. And then we can take Veteran the Third War, which is basically just a stat talent. Bloody Vengeance here is a stacking buff that stacks up a 9% physical damage increase. Abomination Smite is a 10% attack power bonus for everyone in your raid and a 2% strength bonus for yourself. Of course, we take Hysteria here. And then we go Bloodworms. These only amount to about 2% of your total damage during a raid, but more importantly, they keep you alive to keep you above 75% for Bloodgorged. We take Sudden Doom just for some free death coils. Improved Death Strike for 30% increased Death Strike damage, 6% increased critical chance, and increase the healing just a little bit, again, for Bloodgorged. Then we go Heartstrike. Might of Morgraine, increasing the critical strike damage of basically everything we use. And now we have a choice to make with one extra point to put into whatever we want to unlock Bloodgorged and Dancing Rune Weapon. I recommend taking Mark of Blood or Vampiric Blood. Mark of Blood is better for your raid healing or keeping your tank alive. And then Vampiric Blood is for more for yourself to survive raid mechanics. You can also take Scent of Blood or Improved Blood Presence, but I would recommend going with Mark of Blood here. And then of course we finish off with 5 out of 5 Bloodgorged and Dancing Rune Weapon. Moving on to the Unholy Tree, we want to take 2 out of 2 Vicious Strikes, which isn't a great talent for us, but it's something we need to get down further into the tree. And we want to take 3 out of 3 Virulence for our spell hit, 3% spell hit. 2 out of 2 Epidemic, just so our diseases last longer. 3 out of 3 Ravenous Dead, gives us some strength, and our Ghoul some strength. 5 out of 5 Necrosis, just makes our auto attacks hit that much harder. And then Bloodcake Blade for the same reason, and then finish off with Night of the Dead. Now some people might remember a time where 2 out of 3 Morbidity was taken over Night of the Dead, and you would be remembering correctly. But from an offhand comment from my guild lead saying Death Coil is a dog filler, caused me to look into some possible changes into the talent, where after some simming where the damage was higher overall with Night of the Dead and some practical real world testing to find out that the 90% damage reduction applies to the Guardian Ghoul, not just the Pet Ghoul as the tooltip would have you believe, allowing it to survive raid mechanics. These 2 points being changed into Night of the Dead will provide you with more DPS than 2 out of 3 Morbidity. Although, as a disclaimer, on some fights such as Ignis, your Ghoul will still die due to the fact that, while yes, it still reduces the AoE portion of Flame Jets, the dot that gets applied is still considered single target and does not get mitigated. In cases like these, you do want to go back to 2 out of 3 Morbidity, otherwise you are losing a substantial amount of DPS. Your best glyphs for the entire expansion are going to be Glyph of Dancing Rune Weapon, Disease, and Death Strike on the major slots, and then for the minor slots, we're going to go with Glyph of Blood Tap, Pestilence, and Raise Dead. Your best profession will always be Engineering for hyperspeed accelerators, being an amazing 1 minute cooldown, Global Thermal Sapper Charges, and Serenite Bombs, which are basically just free damage, and Nitro Boots providing more value to you practically in a raid than any sim could ever show you by allowing you to reposition quickly and avoid raid mechanics. Your best secondary profession will be jewel crafting, but once epic gems are introduced, you can consider blacksmithing, but they're so close in the numbers to where I wouldn't bother switching them around and only have blacksmithing if you happen to be that originally. Consumables are going to be Endless Rage for the flask, Dragonfin Fillet for the food buff, making sure you're using this over Fish Feast as you'll get more AP from it, and speed potions for your potions. But you can use indestructible potions on fights where pre-potting is extremely awkward, like Freya, Algalon, or Yogg-Saron. The opener is the only really difficult part about Blood DPS, otherwise the rotation is extremely simple. For the opener, assuming you're going to be using Bloodlust off the rip, would be Hysteria, Racial, Hyperspeed Accelerators, Icy Touch, Plague Strike, Heart Strike twice, Death Strike, Empower Rune Weapon, Ghoul, Dancing Rune Weapon, Icy Touch, Plague Strike, Heart Strike immediately into Blood Tap, Heart Strike 4 times, then settling into your rotation. I highly recommend practicing this on a dummy for a while, as performing this well is key to your success because a lot of your damage on this class, as with most classes, is front-loaded into your opener. If Bloodlust is going to be used later in the fight, you should do an opener such as Hysteria, Racial, Hyperspeed Accelerators, only if they will be up for Bloodlust, Icy Touch, Plague Strike, Heart Strike, Death Strike, Ghoul, into Dancing Rune Weapon, if they will be back up for Bloodlust again, then settle in your rotation. The reason for the change is to avoid your runes from desyncing because we're not using Empower Rune Weapon. The rotation is very easy, and it's a simple priority system. Use your runes as they come off cooldown on the appropriate abilities, making sure to refresh your diseases with Pestilence at about 2 seconds left of the duration. Then use Death Coil when runes are on cooldown, making sure to stay above 25 runic power if your next action after Death Coil will be Death Strike. And remember, it's okay to overcap on runic power, it's going to happen, don't worry about it, that's fine. And then use Horn of Winter if literally nothing else is available. For your AoE rotation, it's as straightforward as putting your diseases up, spreading them with Pestilence, using Death Strike to make death runes, and then casting Blood Boil on 5 or more mobs and Heart Strike on 4 or less. Make sure you're using Dancing Rune Weapon during trash if applicable, and apply Dancing Rune Weapon's diseases to get its maximum Blood Boil damage. Before I show a clip of the opener and single target rotation in action, I want to give a quick overview of the Rune Grace Period mechanic, so when I mention it during the rotation demonstration, you know what I'm talking about. Rune Grace Period is a mechanic for Death Knights that essentially allows them to use their filler spells while their runes are available without the need to worry about using your runes exactly when they come off cooldown. So, everyone knows that runes have a 10-second recharge time. You use Heart Strike, and 10 seconds later, that rune comes back. But, while in combat, once your rune comes off cooldown and is available again, that rune will immediately start its cooldown like you had used it the moment it was available up to 7.5 seconds left of the cooldown. So, whenever a rune comes off cooldown, you have 2.5 seconds to use any other ability or action until you're missing out on rune cooldowns. Here I'm going to show you the opener and one cycle of Pestilence to give you more context and visibility of the single target rotation, as well as how to use your cooldowns while in combat and not just during the opener. In the lower middle portion of the screen, you can see what abilities I'm using to help you follow along. So we're going to start out with all of our cooldowns. Icy Touch, Plague Strike, Heart Strike twice, into Death Strike, Empower Rune Weapon, Ghoul, Dancing Rune Weapon, Icy Touch, Plague Strike, Heart Strike, Blood Tap, Cancel Aura, Heart Striking 4 times, into Death Strike, and then 2 Death Coils, which you can fit in because of our Rune Grace Period, Heart Striking twice, Death Strike, Heart Strike, and then we can barely fit in Pestilence at the end, and it's just as easy as that. It does not get any harder than this. It is this for the rest of the fight. With our abilities coming back up, we want to make sure we're above 60 runic power, and that our trinkets are procced. So we can Ghoul, Dancing Rune Weapon, Icy Touch, Plague Strike, Heart Strike, Blood Tap, and then just keep going like that. I want to talk a little bit more about Dancing Rune Weapon, and I'm going to start with snapshotting. Now I'm sure you've heard of snapshotting, but just in case you haven't, here's a brief explanation. When applying a dot or summoning a unit such as Dancing Rune Weapon, the game will snapshot your current stats that said ability or summon scales with or benefits from, and this ability or summon will keep those stats for its duration, regardless of if your stats change or buffs fall off. Dancing Rune Weapon deals with haste, crit, attack power, and percent damage increases. So the idea with snapshotting is using these cooldowns or abilities when your stats are at their maximum so your ability or summon gets the most out of them as possible. The ideal case being with all your trinket procs, buffs, cooldowns, and bloodlust are active on you at the same time. Your trinkets are on a 45-second cooldown, while Dancing Rune Weapon is a 1 minute 30-second cooldown, meaning every other trinket proc you can cast Dancing Rune Weapon and snapshot them, while every other Dancing Rune Weapon usage can be snapshotted with Hysteria as well, with it being a 3-minute cooldown. Dancing Rune Weapon has a unique interaction with Pestilence, where if you have your diseases running on a target, you summon Dancing Rune Weapon and then cast Pestilence while there is another target in range. Dancing Rune Weapon will apply its own diseases without the need of using Icy Touch or Plague Strike. When attempting to spread diseases with Dancing Rune Weapon on 2 or more targets, it is optimal to use Pestilence twice rather than manually using Icy Touch and Plague Strike and then casting Pestilence. While for most of the expansion, applying Dancing Rune Weapon's diseases manually with Icy Touch and Plague Strike or the previously mentioned Pestilence Strike will be optimal, at some point during your gearing in Icecrown Citadel, you'll notice on the sim that applying diseases at all will result in a DPS loss. This is because Dancing Rune Weapon does not scale with your armor pin, so while your personal damage is rising, Dancing Rune Weapon relative to you does not. Being close to not exactly 50% damage in max, the more armor pin you get, the more that 50% decreases up to a point where using the globals on spreading diseases is a DPS loss instead of just casting Death or Heart Strike. This does not apply to any multi-target scenarios using Blood Boil, as Blood Boil is shadow damage, not physical. Blood DPS is a simple spec, so not many weak auras, add-ons, or macros should be required. As long as you have a way to easily see your disease durations with something like Plater, and a way to see your trinkets and Fallen Crusader procs for snapshotting, you're good to go. And if you want, here's a macro that casts all of your cooldowns, although I recommend having Hysteria, Racial, Gloves, and Potions all on separate keybinds, as there are times you may want to cast those by themselves. There's also a next action weak aura created by Fonzus that shows you what ability you should be casting next. While it is a very impressive display of automation and usage of the weak aura add-on, I personally do not recommend actually using it and relying on it unless you're the raid lead and your brain power is being used elsewhere, as I feel it can hinder the ability to actually learn and play a spec, but that is just me. You can use it if you want to. Some of the BIS lists I'm about to show, while not being technical BIS, I feel are more realistic and closer to my personal playstyle of 9% hit and 6.5% expertise wherever possible. While these personal restrictions do lower the ceiling of your damage, they also raise the floor, causing less variance in your overall performance, and I feel that the difference is so minor that it shouldn't matter too much. These lists will also not include anything other than plate and strength items unless there is no other option or does not come from a 25-man raid. The lists in Trial of the Grand Crusader and onwards are also subject to change, as they were made pre-Dancing Rune Weapon fixes. While the list may be close to BIS, there could be some minor adjustments that could happen. To keep up with that, be sure to join the Blood DPS Discord to know if there are any changes that get made. While pre-raid gearing and knacks are long gone at the time of recording, I want to go over them quickly for completion's sake. For pre-raid, most items are pretty easy to get, with them being crafted, BOE, or bought with badges. The only difficult pieces would be Staggering Leg Plates, Band of Frosted Thorns, Gold Amulet of Kings, and Ring of the Kirin Tor. You can swap out Ring of the Kirin Tor with any other DPS ring, such as Titanium Impact Band or Stained Glass Shard Ring, both being BOE, or Hemorrhaging Circle or Mobius Band. I recommend Mobius Band for Horde to reach the hit cap. The Nax list looks like this. Note the 2 etched strength hit gems in the shoulders and gloves. This allows us to hit our 8% hit cap. Items you can look at replacing without much hassle are Great Ring of Collision for Circle of Death. Doing so will also get your expertise closer to the cap. For Horde, I recommend swapping the shoulders and legs for tier pieces while keeping the strength hit gem in the glove slot. In Ulduar, my personal list looks like this. This list is very heavily personalized for hitting 9% hit and 6.5% expertise, and this is also where being human has its biggest impact, with Voljathar being the BIS weapon, so we can benefit more from our racial. Notice the expertise hit gem in the legs along with the 2 expertise hit gems in the boots. These can be swapped out with strength crit and pure strength respectively, but as I said, I like hitting the caps where possible. Also notice the strength stam gem in the legs. Because the socket bonus is good enough on these legs to do so, we can also change our meta gem from Relentless Earthsiege to Chaotic Skyflare, because DKs scale better with critical strike rating rather than agility, strictly talking about how much crit chance they receive. Also, Sis Promise is not technically BIS. This is another item I use to hit expertise cap. You can swap this with Brand's Signet Ring as the best item if you want, or String of the Automaton or Brand's Sealing Ring as other options. If you're Horde, the list looks exactly the same, other than changing any hit and expertise gems accordingly. Hot ticket items you really want to get your hands on are Frigid Strength of Hodir, Mjolnir Runestone, and Seal of the Betrayed King. Trial of the Grand Crusader is where blood really starts to take off, and the Horde and Alliance lists vary greatly. So let's tackle the Alliance one first. This is where you'll start going for the armor pin soft cap of 509, assuming you have Mjolnir Runestone and Blood Gorge talented. To start off, there are 3 items from the previous tier that carry over into Trial, those being Runestone, Frigid Strength of Hodir, and Seal of the Betrayed King. Be sure to take notes of the 20 hit gem in the helm and strength crit gems in the legs and boots, as well as 1 expertise gem. And again, the expertise gem can be switched out for pure strength if you're so inclined. We also have only 3 gems socketed for armor pin, 2 red and 1 blue. For the same reason as the Ulduar list, this 10 armor pin gem also puts us just 1 point over the soft cap, with the socket bonus in the weapon being decent enough where this is worth it. The same socket bonus also applies in the Gloves of Bitter Reprisal, so you can do this there as well. The cloak should be the only difficult item to get this phase, and if that's proving to be too much trouble, you can go with the 10-man version and socket in a strength hit gem into one of the yellow sockets. The Horde list differs greatly from the Alliance one, most notably in the fact that you are not gearing or gemming for the armor pin soft cap. Differences in gear being Executioner's Neck over Frigid Strength, Bloodbath Belt over Girdle of the Impaler, Sabatons of Lifeless Night holding over from Ulduar instead of using Greaves of the 7th Legion, and Band of Violent Temperament being used over Seal of the Betrayed King. Also, again, notice the 10 Expertise and 15 Stam gem in the weapon slot, and change the meta gem again. Also notice the 20 hit gem in the neck and the strength hit gem in the helm. Same thing with the cloak, applies here where you can get the 10-man variety and gem strength hit accordingly. Something that applies to both lists involves Arm Guards of the Netherlord. While they can be swapped out for the blacksmithing wrists as they are extremely similar and the difference is also extremely minor. While Netherlords are BIS, you should not feel bad about using the blacksmithing wrists. Also, Sigil of Virulence is something that you should be prioritizing heavily in gearing. Get the sigil as soon as possible. Your biggest item other than your weapon will be Death's Verdict, and this will be BIS for the rest of the expansion. Icecrown Citadel is where you'll be gymming hard for the armor pin cap. Every single gem in this set is 20 armor pin except this yellow socket that I have set to expertise hit to reach both caps. This set here with Varian's Fury does sim lower than the set with Winding Sheet, the difference being 100 DPS. This set also does not hit the 9% hit cap, but with Winding Sheet you can replace a yellow socket with a 20 hit gem and change your food buff to 40 armor pin. While Shadowmourne is obviously your BIS, again, it is unreasonable to assume you're going to get this item. So your next best weapon will be Glowrin Zelg. The problem is without Shadowmourne you cannot hit the armor pin cap, and you'll be way overcapped on expertise. So without Shadowmourne, we'll be using armor pin food and swap our tier legs with Scourge Reaver's leg plates to try and stem the bleeding. The Winding Sheet set is similar, but with adding a 20 hit gem and a strength hit gem and another socket, while still using armor pin food and swapping our leggings. For Horde, mostly everything is the same, just we can use 1 strength gem. There's also an expertise hit gem in one of the yellow sockets, allowing us to reach hit and expertise cap. The food we use also changes to 40 armor pin at all times. When using the Winding Sheet, our setup does change a little. We do have to swap our belt for a 10-man item, that being Flesh Shaper's Gurney Strap. And now we have the option to use an expertise hit gem, as the hit from the gem won't be required to hit the hit cap. So you can swap it out with a strength crit gem instead. Just remember to have 1 strength gem and still use armor pin food. Again with Shadowmourne, while it is your BIS, you cannot bet on getting it. Like with the Alliance sets above, we will be using armor pin food and swapping our tier legs for Scourge Reaver's leg plates. For Winding Sheet, we're still using armor pin food and the 10-men belt as well, swapping the legs again. And last but not least, Ruby Sanctum. Only a few things change, and that's mostly with gems and food. Just make sure you're not going over 1400 armor pin. It'll be 1260 on your character sheet because Blood Gorge gives you 140. The Varian's Fury and Winding Sheet set are the same, you just don't get to the 9% hit with the Winding Sheet set. The items we're looking for are Penumbra Pendant, Apocalypse's Advance, and Sharpened Twilight Scale. If you look, you'll notice one of the rings changed to Skeleton Lord's Circle from Might of Blight. This is because the armor pen from Might of Blight is no longer needed, and Skeleton Lords helps us hit expertise cap. With the Ruby Sanctum sets, you can start filling in yellow sockets with strength crit gems again. Just remember to hit the 1400 armor pin cap, if possible, and don't go over it. For Horde, the Garrosh's Rage set looks exactly like the Winding Sheet set for Alliance, just using Garrosh's Rage instead. The Winding Sheet set is extremely similar, you're just swapping gems and food buffs around to hit the respective stat caps.